Let's take a look at paint stripper versus sanding. I found this amazing cabinet that I thought would be great as an example to show the differences between actually using furniture stripper, even easy off, or sanding, and which is going to give a better result, plus the pros and cons. And I decided to use this piece for a partial laundry room makeover that I'm going to share with you. It looks like this cabinet's been upcycled a few times, but I'm going to actually see how it works to take it all back, and it looks like I have a couple of layers of paint on here. Anytime I do a furniture makeover, I like to give it a really good clean with degreasing dish soap. I'm really lucky that I have a really large laundry room, so this particular piece is going to work fabulous for storage. I have a separate hose that sets up to the orbital sander to the shock vac. This definitely helps to minimize the dust when sanding, but it doesn't completely remove it all. So I'm going to use a 60 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to start with the top of the table. And I find sanding pretty much my #1 go-to when it comes to taking back any wood furnishings. But to use furniture strippers to remove the paint, there's definitely some pros and cons with it that I want to get into. This ease strip is definitely the only one that I have found on market where I am that doesn't have such a bad odor to it, so I'm kind of grateful for that. I didn't know exactly what I was going to be getting into when I started this project, but I knew that I had at least one, if not two coats. And it looks like as I go, I've got a black layer as well as some kind of aqua blue. Even though sanding can be a little bit fatiguing, it is definitely well worth it, especially if you have a beautiful wood, and this is actually a maple. I know that sanding can get a little bit messy, but it is actually very time saving, I find. Because not only can I cut through the paint layers quite quickly, I can also get to the varnish and or wood stain quite quickly. I'm also using a 1.5 inch belt sander, so I can go around any little lips or tight areas that's hard to get to with an orbital sander. Anytime you want to take back a piece of furniture, especially with sanding, I can't stress enough how important it is to change up your sanding discs, because it actually wears down quite quickly and it will cause further fatigue quicker. Every time I would go around and do a big bulk like the tops and the two sides, I will actually go around and vacuum as I go, and again, this will just help minimize the dust and the sand particles. But again, to remove any paint, sanding to me goes really quickly. But in order not to get too fatigued, sometimes it's best just to do it in small sections and don't be in a rush. Paint stripper is very useful, especially when you have a very detail-orientated piece of furniture. And then that can definitely be very helpful because you don't want to be sanding back a lot of small wood detail. A couple of years ago, I did a huge armoire, and I was really thankful that I used the paint stripper in order to remove and save all of that beautiful wood detail. Since we moved into this house about 6 months ago, I am so impressed with how huge the laundry room is. But there's this kind of space that I really feel that we could do something much more useful with, and that's where this cabinet makeover I think will be perfect for the space. I recently have done some room makeovers for a bedroom, an office, as well as a living room, kind of using the feature wall of board and batten. And I still had a few left over, and I thought, you know, I'm going to save the money and use up what I have, and I'm going to kind of create a half makeover to this room so it will actually really complement this cabinet. So what we're using is a 3.5 inch baseboard molding made out of MDF. Very inexpensive, and you can buy it in bundles. We're using a circular saw, but you can just use a hand saw if you don't have a circular saw, but power tools always make things go by a little bit quicker. So I decided to go with long rectangles as well as putting squares at the top. So what we decided to do is make the rectangles 4 feet in height, and we're making all the cuts for around the space, the door, and the side of the closet, since all of the long rectangles will be the exact same size. To accommodate the smaller squares on the top, we went around and made 12-inch cuts and made enough to accommodate a square at the top of each rectangle. So every rectangle is going to be about 4 feet and each square will be about a foot. I'm always amazed how fast this project goes. So what I want to do is sample the furniture paint stripper as well as the oven cleaner Easy Off as a demonstration to show what the process is about and why I kind of avoid using it most of the time. So I'm just going to use the one door, and I'm going to do half with the furniture stripper and the other half with the oven Easy Off. And the thing that is always discouraging for me to using this paint stripper is it's quite messy. As I say, I'm kind of glad that this particular product is not high in odor. But most of the time you're going to have to work in small sections, and you're going to have to put some kind of wrapping and remove all the air bubbles. And it's a weight process, so there's quite a bit of extra waste involved, and there's quite a bit of time to set it up. So I just find that going around with the orbital sander is just a much faster process. But there are those situations where the furniture stripper can definitely really help with the small wood details depending on the piece that you want to restore. If you're only stripping a flat surface, you could actually just use a spatula, but if you've got corners and grooves, you might want to use something that's got a little bit more of a scour to it. So now that I've waited a whole hour, I'm going to try and see if this oven cleaner actually removes the paint. And what I did notice is it is pulling it back and it is coming off. So that's using that little small scouring tool. What I'm going to do is see if it's actually removed it or lifted it off the wood. I decided just to see, since I've seen other people use the oven cleaner to remove paint, and it does actually work. So if you do have small little areas that you don't have access with an orbital sander, or you don't have a Dremel like I do, this will actually work really well, and it's low cost. So if you just have that one-off project that you would really like to restore, this could be really helpful in the future. So I'm going to take off the saran wrap, and I can already see that the paint is bubbled. So I'm just going to see how fast it comes off with all of that paint stripper. And there's still a little bit of elbow grease that you have to do. And again, if you are working on a flat surface, you can use a spatula. But I want to be able to kind of get into that little groove into the door frame. Again, it's not that I'm against using furniture stripper. It's mostly because I just find it very messy. And for the amount of time it takes to set it up, wait for the actual stripper to activate, then try and pull it all back, remove everything, work in small sections, I just find sanding to go a lot faster. And as you can see in this situation, I still have to try to get the actual stain off the wood. So I'm still going to have to go back and sand it, even knowing the furniture paint stripper actually took off most of the paint. Furniture paint remover or stripper can definitely be helpful when you have certain living situations. So if you have an apartment and you have limited space where you can do a project like this, this is where furniture stripper can definitely be helpful. The fun part about using a feature wall, or kind of whether you're going to do a whole space or you're just going to do portions of the room, is you can actually space out the boards however you want. So you can make them 20 inches, you can make it 15 inches, depending how many boards you'd like to put up. If you come across any outlets, I always use the plate of the outlet and just measure around the board. Then we're just using a regular jigsaw, and this is actually just going to cut exact measurements to the electrical plate. But this type of framing style can really put some visual interest into a space, especially even a laundry room. And what's super fun is you can make either just long rectangles, or if you wanted to, you could actually make the rectangles and the small squares on top like we're about to do. Looks like Gabriel wants to help. So again, I wanted to demonstrate some of the different products out there when you're wanting to actually take back a piece of furniture and bring it down to its natural raw wood. There's definitely a lot of different sander models out there. I'm partial to the Bosch. I've had this for years. It's never let me down. It's worth every penny. But again, it's all about the time savior I find when I use a sander versus a furniture paint stripper. I find it just cuts to exactly what I want. I don't have to worry about setting everything up and then waiting for the stripper to activate, etc., etc. Sanding still comes with its, not so much fun. It can be messy, but I do find that if I work in sections and clean and vacuum as I go, it's really not that bad. But after 3 years of dodging the COVID virus, Ryan and I finally got it. And it was at this point 2 weeks ago that I was just coming down with these really odd symptoms, and I thought it was just me, and I kept going, but it ended up being COVID. It was definitely a strange flu to have. It didn't have a regular flu-like symptoms, didn't have a stuffy nose, didn't have a cough, nothing. But I was really tired really quickly, and I was down for a good 4 to 5 days. This little Dremel tool, which is a sander, is fantastic. It comes with all the bits that you could need, which makes for getting to those little tiny areas that you can miss with the orbital sander perfect. So I'm going to finish off the entire piece with a 220 grit just to smooth everything out, and I think it would be nice to highlight this piece. But I really wanted to finish the entire laundry room for this video, but due to the fact of getting COVID, I had to kind of break down the project a little bit, so I had some time to get better. So I'm doing a 50% paint to water ratio just in white chalk paint. And you can always play with that ratio and test a small little area in the back to see if you like the actual volume, whether you have too much water or you want more paint. And this, you can see what it's going to look like against the wood. The biggest things when it comes to doing a paint wash onto wood is making sure that your brush strokes and when you're wiping back, you're going with the grain with the wood. For paint washes, I always work in small sections, and I would generally overlap the paint wash. This way the paint wash doesn't look broken off and there's no missing areas. I was really pleasantly surprised how well the sanding went, and I was really happy with this paint wash. It really just lightened and really highlighted the natural wood grain and just made it a little bit brighter. It definitely absorbs really quickly, and in some cases when you're working on a project, you may even want to do 2 washes. Wait for the first one to dry completely and then do a second one. For this project, I only did the one. Once everything's dry, I'm going to use the With Love furniture salve to seal the whole project and enhance and enrich the wood. So I definitely have a few ideas going on for this laundry room space, but due to the fact that both of us got sick with COVID, I had to kind of break it off into almost a 2-part series just to give ourselves enough time to get better. So this wall is 10 feet in length, so we're going to make the spaces in between the boards about 16 inches. For the board that's going to go on the very top, we're going to have to make the 45-degree angles because the one board isn't going to fit the whole length, so we had to make another cut. So by doing 2 45-degree angles, we were able to slide it in together to make it seamless. But picking out the design of the spacing that you want, putting on the no more nails, nailing everything to the actual wall is really fast, really quick, and it's super fun. It really elevates a space. Once all the seams have been fully filled with the caulking to avoid any gaps, we'll go around with a 220 sandpaper and just sand everything nice and smooth. The room was originally painted in the Gray Owl, and here I'm using the Genesis White in the Benjamin Moore Regal matte finish. I'm going to go and apply 2 full coats and let everything dry, and I think there's something else I'd like to add to this space. Having a few pieces of furniture brought down to its natural wood element really warms a room. I have to admit, it's nice to kind of have that mismatch around the home. So even if you have some painted furniture and then you have some more natural wood elements, depending on the stain or tone that you prefer, it really actually pulls together as far as a decor into your room and your room designs. Highly recommended. So I'm adding in 6 of these cast iron hooks so we could utilize the space for the utility room that it is. And I'm even thinking about adding a shelf in later. I am not sure. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me in this week's video. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I have so many more fun DIYs, room makeovers, and furniture transformations to share with you soon. Until then, take care.